The village of Westbury, nestled among the rolling hills of Somerset, looked serene under the blanket of early morning mist. Cobbled lanes curved between centuries-old cottages, and the distant chime of the church bell echoed faintly through the quiet. But behind the stillness, something stirred. Isla Whitaker pulled her coat tighter as she walked briskly toward the town square. The fog clung to the air like a ghost, heavy and strange for spring. She glanced over her shoulder, unsettled by a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Her steps quickened. Since her return from university, Isla had felt an unease in Westbury. Something about the village had changed, and not just the buildings or the faces. It was as if the place was holding its breath. Outside the butcher's shop, an elderly man named Mr. Cowan stood by his cart, staring blankly at the war memorial. He didn't respond when Isla greeted him. His lips moved silently, as though speaking to someone invisible. "Mr. Cowan?" Isla asked, her voice uncertain. He blinked, turned, and without a word, walked away. Isla stood still. That was the third person this week who had acted oddly. Her childhood friend, Megan, had mentioned strange dreams. The baker's boy swore he saw someone vanish through a hedge. And now this. She reached the town square, where the fountain gurgled gently. The fog seemed thicker here. Isla paused, drawn to the sound of footsteps echoing on the stones behind her. "Isla." She turned. No one. The fog shifted, parting slightly to reveal a girl standing at the edge of the square. Pale, barefoot, with a torn gray dress that flapped in a wind Isla couldn't feel. Her eyes were dark pools of sorrow. Then, without a sound, the girl disappeared. Isla gasped, heart pounding. Had she imagined it? Suddenly, a firm hand gripped her shoulder. She spun around to find Arthur Rowe, the local historian, and once her late grandfather's closest friend. "You saw her, didn't you?" he said quietly. Isla nodded slowly. Arthur looked grim. "Come with me. There's something you need to know. About your family. About Westbury." And with that, the shadows deepened around them. Arthur led Isla through a narrow alley behind the old bookshop, past a rusting gate, and into a crumbling cottage that smelled faintly of lavender and damp wood. The door creaked as he opened it, revealing a dimly lit parlor cluttered with maps, yellowed documents, and stacks of handwritten journals. "This was your grandfather's," Arthur said, motioning her inside. "He kept everything hidden here after the war." Isla stepped carefully over scattered books. Her fingers brushed the spine of one marked Whispers of the Moor. The air in the room was thick with secrets. Arthur bent down beside the fireplace and pried up a loose floorboard. Beneath it lay a worn leather satchel tied with twine. He handed it to Isla. She opened it slowly. Inside were brittle maps of Westbury, annotated in spidery ink. There were markings she didn't recognize. Circles in the forest, notes along the river, even an X beneath the old church. "Your grandfather believed Westbury sat on something ancient," Arthur said. "Older than the Romans. Older than the Druids." Isla traced the line leading from the town square to the churchyard. "What is this?" "A boundary," Arthur replied. "A place where the veil is thin." "The veil?" she asked, frowning. Arthur nodded. "Between this world and the next. Some call it folklore. He called it truth." Isla's heart thudded. She thought of the barefoot girl, of Mr. Cowan whispering to no one. The chill in the fog. "He said a guardian would return," Arthur continued. "Someone in his bloodline. Someone who could see the lost." She closed the satchel. "Why now?" "Because," Arthur said, voice low, "the veil is weakening. Something is coming through. And it's not just spirits." A knock rattled the door. Arthur froze. No one should know we're here. He crept to the window and peered through the curtain. His face turned pale. "Who is it?" Isla whispered. "No one. No one alive, anyway." He turned back to her. "We have to leave. Now." From outside, the latch lifted on its own, and the door began to open. Isla and Arthur slipped out the back door just as the front creaked open behind them. The chill in the air deepened, and for a moment, The wind seemed to whisper her name. They ran through the narrow garden, down a footpath swallowed by weeds, and out into the mist-thickened streets of Westbury. Isla dared not look back. "What was that?" she asked between breaths. Arthur shook his head. "A wraith. Bound to the veil. They're drawn to movement, to memory. Your presence woke them." They turned into an alleyway, damp cobbles slick beneath their boots, and paused to catch their breath. "Why are they after me?" Isla asked. "Because you're the first to see them in decades," Arthur replied. "They've been waiting." He handed her a silver pendant from his coat pocket. It was simple, engraved with a spiral that shimmered faintly in the fog. "Wear this. It won't keep them away, but it might keep you tethered." "Tethered to what?" "To your world," he said grimly. They headed to the edge of town, where the old railway line ran past crumbling stone walls and overgrown hedgerows. Arthur led her to a disused signal box, long abandoned, its paint flaking and roof sagging. Inside, amidst rusted levers and faded posters, Arthur opened a panel in the wall. Behind it was another map, newer, but with the same strange symbols as her grandfather's. "There's something buried beneath Westbury," he said. "Something sealed. The markings on this map show the binding points. If one fails, the others won't hold." Isla studied the map. One of the markings was circled in red, St. Olwen's Church. "I saw someone there," she murmured. "A barefoot girl." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "Describe her." "She looked my age. Long hair, white dress. But she vanished." Arthur's expression darkened. "Then we're too late. She's crossed over. And if she's here, the others won't be far behind." Suddenly, a low whistle echoed across the moor. They looked out the broken window. A figure stood on the disused tracks, barely visible in the mist, tall, still, wearing a black coat and hat that hadn't been in fashion since the 1940s. It raised one hand and pointed at Isla. Arthur yanked her away from the window. "We're going underground." "Where?" "To the crypt beneath St. Olwen's. Your grandfather left something there. Something meant only for you." Outside, the figure had begun to walk. Slowly, silently, and the fog followed with him. They moved swiftly through the lanes of Westbury, cutting across fields and over rusted gates until the shadow of St. Olwen's Church loomed ahead. The old stone building was half swallowed by ivy, its crooked spire piercing the gray sky. No bell had tolled there in years. Arthur led the way around the side, to a sunken door framed by moss-covered gravestones. He paused only briefly before pulling it open. The hinges groaned like a wounded animal. Inside, the air was colder than outside, still dry and ancient. The stone steps twisted downward, lit only by the flickering beam of Arthur's torch. The walls were lined with carved saints whose faces had worn smooth with time. As they descended, Isla could feel the weight of the earth pressing closer. At the base of the stairs, they reached a vaulted chamber. It smelled of dust and iron. A row of stone coffins lay silent along the walls, each marked with unfamiliar sigils. At the far end, behind an iron gate, was a circular seal carved into the floor. "That's the anchor," Arthur said quietly. "One of the last." Isla stepped toward it. The closer she came, the more her skin tingled, as if the air itself was charged. Her grandfather's journal had mentioned a seal, but it hadn't described the sound, the low, pulsing thrum she could now hear, as though the ground had a heartbeat. Arthur removed a bundle from beneath his coat. Inside was a leather case, and within it, an object wrapped in velvet. He handed it to her. "Your grandfather called it the Stone of Mourning," Arthur said. "It resonates with the veil. Only someone like you can wield it." She unwrapped it. The stone was black, polished smooth, and warm to the touch despite the cold air. A faint blue light shimmered beneath its surface. Suddenly, a cold gust swept through the crypt. The torch flickered. Isla turned and saw the barefoot girl from the churchyard standing just inside the gate. She was pale, almost translucent. Her eyes were wide, sad, and ancient. "You shouldn't be here," Arthur hissed. The girl looked directly at Isla. "They're waking," she whispered. "All of them. Because of her." Then she was gone. No sound. No footsteps. Just mist curling in her place. Arthur cursed under his breath and turned to Isla. We're running out of time. You need to learn how to use the stone before they find you. Who are they? Isla demanded. The ones bound beneath the town. The ones your grandfather kept sealed. The forgotten. Another rumble shook the crypt. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The gate creaked open on its own. Come on, Arthur said, grabbing her hand. We need to leave. Now. As they fled up the stairs, the mist followed, thicker than before, curling like fingers around the edges of the stone. And somewhere behind them, something began to knock from within one of the sealed coffins. The fog had thickened by the time they emerged from the crypt. It curled through the gravestones like smoke, swallowing sound and blurring the shapes of the world. The church loomed behind them, half consumed by the gray. Arthur didn't speak. He led Isla back into the fields with hurried steps, glancing over his shoulder more than once. The mist moved as if it were alive, drawn to their warmth, their breath, their fear. Isla clutched the stone tighter in her coat pocket. Even hidden, it pulsed softly against her palm, like a second heartbeat. They reached a narrow lane where an old Land Rover was parked, mud-splattered and dented. Arthur threw open the door. We'll go to Whitley Manor, he said, starting the engine. It's the last place they won't look. Not yet. As the vehicle jolted forward, Isla looked out the window. Shapes moved in the mist, tall, slow-moving, silent. Not people. Not quite. She blinked, and they were gone. 20 minutes later, they reached Whitley Manor, an aging estate of crumbling brick and vine-wrapped windows. It sat on the edge of the moor like a wounded beast, silent and brooding. Inside, the halls were dark and smelled of old paper and damp stone. Arthur lit the fireplace in a sitting room lined with portraits. Faces stared down at Isla, stern men, pale women, all with the same sharp cheekbones. The ward line. This was your grandfather's safe house, Arthur said. When he wasn't teaching or traveling, he worked here. Seals. Charms. Records of the forgotten. He handed her a thick book wrapped in oilcloth. Start reading. We've got maybe a night before they track us here. Isla opened the book. The pages were covered in dense script, diagrams of circles and runes, drawings of creatures that didn't belong in this world. One near the middle made her freeze. It was the girl, the barefoot girl, but not drawn with kindness. Her mouth was stitched shut. Her hands were bound with runes. Beside her image was a name, Mara. She's not one of them, Isla said quietly. She was warning me. Arthur looked at her sharply. That's what they do. They whisper and pretend to help. But once you open the seal... I didn't. But the veil's thinning. Something is feeding it. That night, as the fire died low and Arthur drifted into sleep in the chair, Isla remained curled up with a book, eyes sore and head heavy. The stone lay beside her, glowing faintly. The house creaked. Somewhere upstairs, a door opened on its own. Isla rose, heart thudding, and stepped into the corridor. The air had changed. Thicker. Colder. Footsteps echoed above her, soft and wet. As she climbed the stairs, the light bulbs flickered, casting long, jerky shadows. On the landing stood a mirror. It was cracked down the center. As she approached it, and saw not her reflection, but a hallway she didn't recognize, filled with fog, with stone walls and rows of doors. One of them opened slowly. Inside, something stirred. Then the mirror shattered with a loud crack. Arthur was beside her in seconds, pulling her back. You saw it, didn't you? He asked. The doorless hall. She nodded. That means they know where you are now. From the broken shards of mirror, a whisper rose, barely audible. Isla. Dawn broke pale and reluctant over Whitley Manor. The mist had not lifted. It clung to the windows like breath on glass, smothering the world in silence. Inside, Isla barely slept. Her dreams had been filled with doorless corridors and whispering voices that knew her name. Arthur packed hurriedly. We've outstayed our safety. They'll breach the old wards before sunset. Isla stood near the hearth, the stone pulsing in her hand. That hallway in the mirror. It felt real. Arthur looked at her sharply. Because it is. The doorless hall is one of the oldest crossings between their world and ours. It's not supposed to appear unless the seal has cracked. And it has? Only slightly, he replied, though he didn't sound sure. Before they could leave, a loud knock echoed through the manor. 3 deliberate strikes. Arthur froze. He raised a hand for silence, then crept toward the entrance. Isla followed behind, her breath shallow. The door creaked open an inch. A figure stood outside, tall, lean, wrapped in a gray coat that shifted like the fog. The man smiled. "Arthur," he said, voice smooth as oil. "You've been hiding ghosts again." Arthur slammed the door shut and bolted it. "Who was that?" Isla whispered. "His name's Elliot Byrne," Arthur said, teeth clenched. "He used to be human." The knocking returned, softer now, almost polite. Then a second voice joined, female, melodic, familiar. "Mara," Isla whispered. Arthur turned sharply. "You must not answer her." But Isla was already walking toward the door, drawn by the voice like a thread pulling at her chest. "Isla, don't." She paused, hand inches from the handle. The voice stopped. A new sound came, with splintering. The back of the house. Arthur grabbed her wrist. "We run. Now." They burst out through the cellar, crossing a sodden garden behind the manor. The fog was alive again, curling in strange patterns as if stirred by breath. As they reached the edge of the woods, Isla looked back. The figures had entered the manor. Through the cracked windows, she saw them walking without hurry, without care. One of them turned and looked directly at her. Not with eyes, but with knowing. They didn't stop until they reached a crumbled railway tunnel deep in the moor. The entrance was hidden behind thick ivy and fallen branches. Inside, it smelled of rust and stone. Arthur lit a torch. This was one of the old escape routes. Before the war, this line ran straight to the coast. "There's a vault ahead, your grandfather's emergency archive." They walked in silence for 10 minutes before reaching a sealed iron door. Arthur pressed his palm against a symbol etched in the wall. The door hissed and swung open. Inside was a circular chamber lined with books, relics, and strange glass cases. In the center stood a table, carved with concentric circles and runes. Arthur placed the stone upon it. "It needs to be contained," he said, "until we understand what it's doing to you." But before Isla could reply, the stone flashed, bright enough to light the entire vault. The runes on the table glowed, and the chamber trembled. A voice filled the room. Not Mara's, not Elliot's, but deeper. Older. "The seal has been touched. The doorless hall is open. The blood of Ward has called it." Then, with a violent burst, a fracture split the far wall. Through it, the mist poured in, and within the mist, dozens of silent figures began to step forward. Arthur shouted, "Get behind me!" But Isla was transfixed, her gaze locked on the fracture. In its depths, beyond the gray, the corridor from the mirror waited. And a door now stood open. The cold air rushing through the fracture smelled of rain and rotting leaves. Isla backed away, heart pounding as the mist bled further into the vault, bringing the whispering figures with it. Arthur chanted under his breath, drawing a line of light in the air with a piece of chalk that glowed faintly blue. The mist recoiled from it, hissing softly. "They can't cross this ward," he said. "Not yet." Isla turned her eyes back to the fracture. The open door in the hall beyond it pulsed with a dull red glow, and the corridor behind it stretched impossibly far, lined with tall black arches that seemed to breathe. "Is that really the doorless hall?" she asked. Arthur nodded grimly. "It's not meant for the living. It only opens when something ancient has stirred, or when someone with blood right calls it." Isla's voice was barely a whisper. "Me." The stone on the table was now dark, dormant again. But the damage was done. Arthur paced. "There's something we missed. The hall shouldn't respond to you unless you've been marked." He reached for one of the books on the shelf, flipping pages with trembling hands. "Here. The old sign." It shows up under extreme magical pressure. Isla, your shoulder where the scar is. She hesitated, then pulled her jumper aside. A symbol, faint and fiery red, had appeared just above her collarbone. Not a wound, but a mark, 2 circles entwined with a single line through them. Arthur paled. You've been chosen as a keeper. A what? He turned toward her slowly. It means the hall accepts you. You're part of its cycle now. And the creatures in the mist, they'll hunt you, twist you, or try to make you cross. Isla clenched her fists. Then tell me how to stop it. You don't stop the hall, he said. You bargain with it, or you survive it. Suddenly, the whispering voices grew louder, forming words. Not English, but something Isla's ears could still understand. Come through, come home. Arthur's chalk barrier began to crack, lines of light flickering. They're testing it. They know we're weak. He rushed to a cabinet and pulled out a small brass mirror. This belonged to your grandfather. He used it to step between worlds. I'm not ready, Isla said, backing away. You were chosen, Arthur said, pressing the mirror into her hands. If we're going to survive, we need to seal the fracture from the inside. That means someone has to go into the hall. Isla stared at the mirror. Her reflection was warped, as if the glass held a different version of her. A braver one. What if I can't find the way back? You will, Arthur said, because I'll be holding the mirror from this side. The fracture pulsed, widening. Isla took a step forward. The mist curled around her ankles. One more step, and the mist swallowed her whole. Inside the doorless hall, silence reigned. No wind, no echo, just the soft thump of Isla's boots against the stone floor and the ever-present sensation of being watched. Then she heard it, a single footstep behind her. She turned. Mara stood there, not the girl she remembered, but a reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, and smiling. Welcome, Isla, she said. We've been waiting. The door vanished the moment it closed behind Isla. There was no going back now. Only the corridor stretched endlessly ahead, lit by flickering sconces that burned with blue fire. The air pressed in, thick with the scent of old stone and forgotten grief. Mara walked beside her, barefoot, her voice like silk unraveling. You shouldn't have come alone. I didn't have a choice, Isla said. You always have a choice, Mara replied. But the hall remembers. And it has a long memory. They passed rows of statues, each cloaked in dust, their faces eerily familiar. Isla stopped. That one, she looks like my mother. Mara nodded. The hall reflects what you carry. Regret. Hope. Fear. As they moved deeper, doors began appearing on either side of the corridor. Some were closed, some ajar. Each hummed with quiet energy. What are they? Isla asked. Memories, said Mara. Not yours. The hall's. It collects them, deals, betrayals, promises. Some doors hold truth. Others traps. Mara stopped in front of one. This one is yours. Isla hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was a warm, sunlit room. A garden bloomed outside the window, and a woman sat by a spinning wheel, humming. Her back was turned, but Isla knew that song. Mum. The woman turned. It was her mother, but younger, eyes alight with life. She smiled. You found it, she said. The hall was always meant for you, Isla. Tears stung Isla's eyes. What is this? Is it real? A memory you weren't meant to keep. I gave it to the hall once, to keep you safe. She stood, crossing the room to press her hands against Isla's. But it's time you remembered. A rush of warmth filled Isla's chest, and suddenly she did remember. Her mother speaking to Arthur in hushed voices, the mirror being hidden, the night the mist nearly breached the edge of their village. She remembered being marked as a baby, and her mother whispering the old words to seal the mark. Then the door slammed shut, and Isla was back in the corridor. Mara stood quietly. You saw her. Isla nodded. She made a deal. With the hall. She did, Mara said. And now it wants you to make one too. The corridor trembled. The sconces flickered. A shadow passed overhead, though there was no ceiling. What happens if I refuse? Isla asked. Then it takes what it needs, anyway. The hall is never empty. It's always hungry. Far ahead, a massive archway loomed, black stone etched with runes that shimmered silver. Mara turned to her. This is where I stopped, she said. I wasn't strong enough to go further. You never told me why you ran away, Isla said. Mara looked down. Because I thought if I left, the hall would forget me. But I was wrong. It never forgets. She placed her hand over Isla's heart. But you're different. You're not here to run. From the archway, a voice began to rise, low and layered, like a choir speaking from deep water. Speak your offering. Speak your truth. Isla stepped forward. My name is Isla Merton, she said. You marked me without asking. You took my family. But I came to give something too. The hall waited. My promise, she said. I'll walk your path. I'll carry your memory. But you will not take anyone else. The runes flared, then dimmed. Mara smiled faintly. It heard you. But did it listen? A sound like a great bell echoed through the hall. The archway began to open. And from the dark beyond, something vast began to move. The archway groaned as it opened, revealing a grand chamber bathed in silver moonlight that had no source. The stone beneath Isla's boots thrummed with ancient power. She stepped forward, her pulse loud in her ears. Mara followed, though slower now, her expression wary. This is the hall's heart, she whispered. Whatever happens here, binds. Pillars lined the room, each carved with names, some in languages Isla recognized from old books, others in symbols that seemed to twist when stared at too long. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal made of mirror-like obsidian. Upon it, a single quill floated above a sheet of parchment. Isla approached, the weight of centuries pressing against her chest. The voice returned, colder than before. A name, a truth, a cost. Mara stepped closer. This is the bargain. Every Merton who stood here left something behind. Some gave memories. Others gave people. Isla's breath caught. What did you give? I gave my voice, Mara said. My real one. This one the hall lets me keep for now. The quill hovered expectantly. Isla looked down at the parchment. It was blank, yet somehow alive. Waiting. She thought of everything the hall had taken, her family's peace, her mother's youth, her own childhood. I won't trade someone else's life, she said aloud. That ends with me. She reached for the quill. The moment her fingers brushed it, pain lanced through her hand, searing, radiant, like a blade made of light. She cried out but held on. Images flooded her mind. The first Merton, stepping into the hall. A king bargaining for reign. A woman in a red cloak offering her shadow. Her mother, whispering into the mirror, handing over Isla's mark as payment. Then her own face, older, harder. Standing in this same room again, but alone. She blinked the vision away. The parchment still waited. I offer my memory, Isla said. Not to forget, but to give. She placed the quill to the page and began to write. Not a name, but a story. Her story. The truth of what happened. The loss, the sacrifice, the silence. Her family's love. Her promise to end the cycle. As she wrote, the ink glowed gold, then faded. The voice returned. The hall accepts. But it does not forget. The chamber rumbled. The pedestal cracked, and the parchment turned to ash. The quill shattered. Mara gasped. You broke the bargain. No, Isla said quietly. I rewrote it. A gust of wind tore through the hall, howling with rage, or maybe release. The pillars trembled. Light poured from the runes. The stone beneath their feet split. Cracks raced across the floor, revealing veins of white fire. The chamber began to collapse inward, pulled by something unseen. We have to go, Mara shouted. They ran, sprinting back through the archway as the hall roared behind them. The corridor writhed, warping as if it were made of smoke and memory. Doors slammed shut. Statues turned to dust. Ahead, A sliver of daylight appeared. Isla pushed toward it, heart pounding. Behind her, the voice called one last time. The hall remembers. And one day, it will return. She didn't look back. The breath of the forest hit Isla like a slap. Cool, damp, alive. She stumbled from the collapsing doorway of the hall just as it sealed itself behind her, vanishing with a hiss of displaced air. Grass greeted her knees as she fell forward, trembling. Beside her, Mara knelt, coughing, eyes wide with disbelief. The hall was gone. Where once had stood an ancient ruin of stone and sorrow, now there was only mist curling through the trees. Mara rose slowly, her hands gripping the earth. I can hear again, she whispered. Isla looked at her. The haunted stillness that had always clung to Mara was gone. She stood lighter, taller.
Free.
Birdsong filled the silence, the first true birdsong Isla had heard in days. The forest exhaled. Life returned. Did it work? Mara asked, uncertain. Is it really over? Isla looked toward the place where the hall had stood.
No, she said.
But it's sleeping. For now. They made their way back to the edge of the village. No guards watched the paths. No whispers drifted from the trees. The air was simply ordinary. When they reached the boundary of the village, Isla paused. Her heart panged at the sight of the old gate, worn with time, the sign that still read, "Welcome to Grasmere." Everything looked the same, but felt different. Mara stopped beside her. You don't have to go back. Isla smiled faintly. I'm not. Not in the way I used to be. They walked through the streets like ghosts returning from war. People stared, some with confusion, others with hope. No one spoke. Then a child pointed. Mom, she whispered, tugging her mother's skirt. That's her. That's the girl from the hall. Isla didn't stop. She walked straight to the house where it all began. The old red door creaked open before she reached it. Her mother stood there, frail but whole, her eyes wide. Isla, she whispered. Is it really? Isla stepped forward and embraced her. I'm home. Her mother clutched her, sobbing quietly into her shoulder. That night, as the village gathered outside the house, torches flickering, no one spoke of fear. Only quiet awe. Mara stood beside Isla, her arms crossed, watching the people as if seeing them for the first time. One by one, they placed flowers at the gate. Tokens. Gratitude. Isla knew the hall still lingered in the world, somewhere deep beneath the hills, in the quiet between breaths. But the silence it once fed on was broken now. Its grip was undone, and she would make sure it never found its way back. For the first time, in generations, Grasmere was at peace. And Isla Merton had rewritten her family's fate.